Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Landlord Live. This is episode number 67. My name is Eric Worrell with RentPrep.com, and I am joined by my co-host, working left to right, Andrew Schultz from Realty Edge. How you doing, Andrew?
Good. How are you this morning?
I'm doing pretty swell. And Jen Rulins from Fish Property Management. How you doing, Jen?
Good morning. I'm doing great.
Great, great. For anybody who maybe hasn't watched before, Andrew is a property manager here in the Western New York area, where I also live and where RentPrep headquarters is based out of. Manages about 125 doors, 120 doors, Andrew?
Yeah, it's right around there.
Okay. And then Jen, you are, let me see if I can remember correctly, Williamsport?
Yes.
Williamsport, PA, home of the Little League World Series. Been managing properties for about 20 years. And you guys got a little over 500. Is that right?
Like 650. Yeah.
Well,
I guess depending on your definition of a little, right? I might have been right, but probably wrong by most people's definition. So today we are going to be covering 3 recent news stories that affect landlords and property managers in the United States. And we're also going to be covering a couple questions that came up in the RentPrep for Landlords Facebook group. Before we get into the little stories, I'm just going to put this up on screen. If anybody watching has any questions at all, you can comment anytime. We can pull those comments up on the screen. You can get 2 experts to weigh in on your situation or whatever you're dealing with. So feel free to ask questions, anything you got, being a landlord, or anything you might want to discuss, or even just kind of commentary on what we're talking about here on the show today. So the first thing that we are going to talk about, I think this one's pretty interesting. This comes out of Ohio, and this is in the last 7 days. I have the link up on the screen if anybody wants to check that out. But basically, Ohio is trying to speed up evictions, and I'll pull up the story on the screen now. Let's see here. We'll make it a little bit bigger. And here we go. So the law to speed up housing eviction in Ohio is blatant kowtow to landlord interest. So this is an editorial from cleveland.com. But basically what it's saying is that in the state of Ohio, that they're looking to speed up evictions by starting to count weekends and holidays towards the eviction notice time period. I thought this was interesting because certain people in our community might not be aware of how notifications work as far as timelines. And also, if you live in Ohio, the fact that a 3-day notice can be sped up. So this one sentence here kind of talks about it. It says the landlord serves a 3-day notice after they depart. Saturday is day 1, Sunday is day 2, and Monday, Christmas, is day 3. They come back home Monday night and discover a Merry Christmas note from their landlord in the form of a 3-day notice. So basically saying that there is no stipulations on the timeline for a 3-day notice. Andrew, when you hear this, what comes to mind, especially in New York State and your kind of experiences and this article?
I read through the article, and it certainly has. There's definitely a slant towards this article. The way it was written, it's very obvious what the bias is on the article. But I actually don't see a reason to have 3-day notices count on weekends and holidays. Basically, we look at it as if our office is closed or if the court offices are closed, we don't constitute that as a day as part of the 3-day notice, and it's never failed us. We've never really had an issue with it. I guess I could see why people would want to shorten that time frame and count weekends and holidays and things like that. But I don't know. I don't see it as necessary. We just kind of go on with our process and do our thing. I don't know. Jen, what do you think? I don't know if it's something, I don't know what the laws are in PA, actually.
Yeah, ours are generally on 10 days. And I consider us to be pretty landlord friendly in Pennsylvania. 3 days is pretty short. To be counting weekends and holidays seems a little aggressive. The example portrayed is, really sensitive this time of year, right? It's about Christmas, and you can imagine that scenario. But it happens a lot. Your Labor Days, your Memorial Days, you got these 3-day holiday weekends.
Yeah, exactly.
So I kind of wonder what the true intent the law is trying to do, because I was talking to Eric before the broadcast. We have in Pennsylvania 10-day notice to quits, and weekends and holidays traditionally have counted. Of course, you can't take action on those days because the courts are closed. And recently at a local judge, I was told if the 10th day is a Sunday or a holiday, you can't count it. So maybe it was going to be the case, but now you have to let Monday go and take action on Tuesday. I don't think that's actually true across the whole state. I think it's one of these things where each judge does their own thing. And maybe that's what they're trying to address here, is to legislate what counts and what doesn't. And, the first guy to make an offer sets the anchor. And maybe the first guy to make an offer was a landlord.
Yeah, I think you might be right there. I mean, I'd have to go and research laws in New York, but I don't think there's anything that actually, yeah, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, there may be something on the books in New York that stipulates that like a federal holiday doesn't count towards a 3-day notice simply because the actual court offices are closed. But I think that might be as far as it goes. I'm not sure what the state law actually says about weekends. We've just never counted them. I've never felt the need to.
I know for New York that as far as eviction, if it's like a 30-day eviction notice, it's like a full calendar month. So if you serve the eviction on the 4th of December, that's not going to go into effect January 4th. It's like pretty much the end of January is when that eviction.
Right, exactly. Yeah, if you serve it on December 4, it doesn't go into effect until January 1, and then they have to be out at the end of January.
Yeah. So that I think that covers that pretty well. We got a few questions that kind of came in here. I'm just going to pull those up on screen. Just say hello to Jen Kuhn and
morning, Jen.
Yvette from San Diego. We're always jealous of you here up in the Northeast. This is a pretty long one. I'm not going to pull up. I'll put it on the screen for a second. Actually, it's going to kind of cover it, but really quick. Well, maybe not super quick, but Margaret had some questions on an article about ESAs. And Jen, I know you're pretty well versed and comfortable talking about that topic. If you know what I'll say, Margaret, if you could shorten up your questions, if you have any specific questions about ESAs, just because I don't want to kind of go through on the live trying to read through all that, but maybe we can cover that towards the end of the live show here. So next topic I wanted to address here. So this one's pretty interesting. This is about an elderly man who is 78 years old who was evicted for using medical marijuana. So this one's actually very close to Andrew and I here. This is in Niagara Falls. And this gentleman, to give you the full scoop, basically what happened is he was living with HUD, with rental assistance. And he, at one point, the property manager came into the property and found marijuana. And at that particular time, the gentleman did not have any kind of license or any kind of doctor's note saying that that was medical marijuana. He has since gotten that. But because of that, he was actually evicted by the property management company, which I think was actually like from like Tennessee in a different area. But from reading this article, what did you think about this article, Jen, with this guy who was evicted for medical marijuana?
If it's that vape pen they show in the picture, it's not discoverable actually by the landlord. Those things are odorless. They create no issue. I kind of read the article and suspected that this gentleman was maybe smoking actual, like, the grass, you know, with the smoke and the smell. And listen, that is very, very smelly. It's very disturbing to other people. And I know a lot of landlords, even where it is legalized in different ways, are saying, no, you can't just like smoke the grass indoors. Like the same way you can't smoke cigarettes indoors, you can't smoke it indoors. So I suspect he has got, you know, some people have gotten a hold of his story and have posed him with this innocuous like vape pen. Truly, my thoughts on it are, because we're preparing. I mean, we know that it's coming to Pennsylvania, it's coming to New York, or you have it in New York, and we are ready for what this is going to mean. But the vape pens are my preferred method of them using it. I mean, I have family members who use them out west, and I've been in their presence when they use it. It is not a concern to a landlord for a tenant to use an edible or a vape pen, especially when prescribed by a doctor. So I don't know. I think the story is a little convoluted. And I do, of course, feel very sorry for him, but I think there's more to it.
Yeah. One of the things that the story highlights is if you just look at the title, it just says he's evicted for using medical marijuana. But technically, by the letter of the law in this story, he was evicted for having marijuana without a medical license and then later obtained it. So, I mean, to me, it's kind of like if you got a speeding ticket and you didn't have a license. At that time, you did not have a license, so you're driving illegally, you know? Yeah. So to say the story afterwards was like, well, I got my license after I got the ticket, you know, that's kind of, to me, being a little bit kind of clickbaity, I guess. But Andrew, what were your thoughts reading in this article?
Actually, I wanted to ask Jen, because I'm just not familiar. In New York, we have medical, but not recreational. What do you guys have currently in Pennsylvania?
We have a medical policy, but it's pretty restrictive. The conditions that can be diagnosed to get it. So it's not extremely popular, but you know, you hear it everywhere. I see it everywhere. I rent to students. So, I mean, these kids, I just beg of them. I'm like, Make cookies out of it. Just don't smoke it like
Right.
Cheech and Chong. Like it just stinks.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. When I read the article, I feel like there's more than what meets the eye here. I feel like there's more to this story that we're just not hearing through the news outlets. I did see that the guy was using, I think it actually said that he was using plant-based, or maybe I'm making that up. I don't know. But he definitely did not have his medical card when he initially was caught using it. And then subsequent to that, it sounds like he got a medical card and got the proper prescriptions and everything else. Actually, this is a story I had talked about with my office manager, and she, prior to coming over to work with me, she was working with in HUD housing essentially, and the policy, because it was still restricted on a federal level, the housing place that she worked with, they basically said no, you can't use it, simply because it's still illegal on a federal level. You're here on a federal voucher program, et cetera, et cetera. So they basically said sorry, but no. So that's kind of what I pulled out of it.
I considered the same thing, that HUD being federal might have different regulations for compliance. And then, of course, with fair housing, you have to treat everybody the same. So if you say illegal activity, then you have to do everybody the same. The other thought was, if medical marijuana is legal, a reasonable accommodation is probably a surefire bet for him to get an accommodation or variance to that policy to be able to have it.
Yeah,
and I think that's where a lot of people are going. They're going to, I need to use this. If you're going to give me problems with it, I'll just get a reasonable accommodation.
Yeah, this one line kind of sums up what Andrew was saying that I kind of highlighted on the screen. It just said that HUD says that it gives landlords discretion on whether to evict residents for using it because of the fact that it is a federal. So from the sounds of it, if this was the same situation, but this man wasn't on federal assistance and was a tenant in California, there would be no grounds for eviction. So it's just because I wonder how that would work in California too, where recreationally it's legal, but HUD's still federal. That'd be kind of interesting to see how that would play out in a state where it's recreational.
No, I'm sure we're going to have to deal with this probably within the next couple of years in New York, where it's just full on recreational medical, all legal. And it'll be interesting to see what the various policies are that landlords come up with at that point. So, I mean, just because, look, cigarettes are legal, but you can still say you can't smoke cigarettes in my apartment. I would assume that marijuana is going to fall into those same general guidelines.
We're actually going to make an alteration to our lease about it, because we rent to a marijuana grower a house, right? They're here growing it as part of the legal operation. They're a national company. And when I talked to their CEO, I asked him, what is your legal department saying about recreational in our state? And he said, essentially 2 years to recreational in PA, and that within 1 year, we would have a better or more extensive medical policy. And he told me that in probably August, and I just saw it in the paper last week. I think my dad sent me the article actually, and it was about how they're looking to revise and expand the list of diagnoses in Pennsylvania. So my thought on this is, I'm going to make the rules I want to have as far as marijuana use in my units in today's leases, in the hopes that by the time I get everybody renewed onto that lease, we're prepared, right?
Right.
Because when the law is passed and you don't have it in your lease,
yeah. That's interesting. Margaret, going back to the question on ESA, she said the concern that she had on the article is that it cited that a landlord may charge a deposit for an ESA. That was the most important point for that she wanted to highlight there. I think all three of us know right off the bat.
Yeah, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, that's part of the issue too of Googling things sometimes on the internet. Anybody can write things. So
did you see that Delta Air? I think it was either Delta or American just revised their ESA policy on flights over, I think it was over 8 hours, and then they also had a separate policy on what constitutes, like, you can't bring something on that's got horns or hooves, or there were a couple of other things that were kind of wrapped up in there. But they really clarified their policy coming into the Christmas holiday as to what's considered an acceptable animal for a long haul flight over 8 hours and stuff like that. And apparently whatever they did, based on the article I read, must be in compliance with, I don't remember the name of the act that they have to follow, but it's a Passenger Rights Act or something like that. I have a feeling that they're going to see some backlash over it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. You would think though, they had the big time attorneys that would be going through that with a fine tooth comb.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Okay. We got another recent news story here. This one's actually a follow-up story. I thought this one was pretty interesting. From the title, it says "From Hades to Heaven: Fed Up California Landlord and His Tenants Move to Colorado Together." So I just thought this was kind of more of an interesting kind of human interest story. But the landlord here, which people can see on the screen right there in the middle, his name is Tony Hicks. Him and his wife got fed up of the prices in San Jose area where they're from, and they told their renters, they owned 3 rental homes, that they were leaving, and they're selling them and going to Colorado. And actually, a handful of the renters said, "Take us with you." So this guy essentially sold 3 properties in San Jose. Then in, I think it was Boulder, Colorado, if my memory, or Colorado Springs, bought 6 rental properties. And he's got his little ragtag crew here that you can see on the screen, some motorcycles. And they now, he brought them with him. You guys ever heard of a story like this before?
No.
My first thought when I read this article was, what is he using as a basis to qualify these people? Because it's not like they're going over there and immediately have a job lined up and everything. Like, what are you doing to requalify these tenants before you say, okay, come to Colorado with me and let's do this?
I think it's subsidized. I caught from the article that these people were in assisted or subsidized housing. So maybe this is like a Section 8 scenario where he's accepting the voucher and he's these long-term loyal tenants who really like working. I really got from it that this guy has these 3 houses. He's had these tenants for a long time. They're subsidized in some way so that the move wasn't going to be the issue, that they probably don't work. And it didn't get into the details of like, your voucher isn't going to pay $3,000 a month in Colorado Springs like it does in the Bay Area.
Right, exactly.
Even your assistance in general is going to be different there. It's not like everything transfers across states and counties. So I just think there's more to the story, and I don't know.
Well, yeah, I don't know what to make of that one.
Speaking on this topic, Jen, have you ever had a situation where a tenant wants to leave one of your properties, but wants to stay with you and move to a different property?
Oh, frequently. They'll give their notice. And of course, we, to help our owners, we inquire why, because if it's something we could overcome and keep them, we'd like to. But they'll say, no, that, maybe a bigger house or a smaller house or a different location. And can we find something with you? One thing I find happening a lot, Allentown is in the northeast corner of PA, and that's like kind of a bedroom community to the New York City area. So people are living there and working in New York City. Well, they're actually trying to kind of come down into our area, and they kind of think they can get a cheaper cost of living here and still maintaining their work in New York City. And they want to bring those vouchers from Manhattan and things like that, and don't understand that just because you have a voucher somewhere else doesn't mean that your voucher's going to apply, because we have a waiting list in our county. And, and in fact, in one county we work in, they don't have a Section 8 program at all. You have to live in the subsidized properties, or there's no public housing option.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ignorant question, but Billy Joel, when he says we're going to Allentown in that one song, is that Allentown, PA? I've always wondered if that's
it is. Yeah, I think. I don't know if there's another Allentown.
Well, that would make sense.
And Bruce Springsteen was in New Jersey, so I always assumed it was.
Billy Joel was always New Jersey as well, I believe. So
yeah.
Oh, he was Long Island, wasn't he?
Well, whatever. It's all the same.
He was always crashing his vehicle or something. I don't know. All right.
Don't judge Billy Joel.
Hey, I love Billy Joel. So we got a couple questions that came in for the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. I thought this one was a great question. This came from Courtney, and she asked about your top 3 to 5 must-have items in your lease. And you know what? Because you guys might end up stepping on each other's toes if you have a couple here. We'll go one by one. So, Andrew, give me one of your top 3 items that you have to have in your lease.
All right, let's see here. Actually, I have my lease pulled up on my screen. I think the favorite thing that I have in my lease is our lock and lockout policy. Obviously, it says that tenants aren't allowed to change the locks because we use master keyed locks on all of our properties and things like that. But it also specifically breaks out fees for being locked out of your apartment. So if it's 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, during business hours, we charge, whatever. From 5 p.m. to 9 a.m., it's more, because now we need to bring someone in and send them down there to unlock your door. If it's a weekend, it's even more. Actually, no, our weekend rate is the same as our evening rate, but holidays are the highest.
Yeah.
And the reason that we did it that way is because I literally, back when I was first starting out and it was just me running the show, I had to leave a family Christmas celebration, drive, Eric, you'll know because you know the area. I had to drive from Attica to Pendleton, which is about an hour and 20-minute ride, pick up a set of keys, drive probably 45 minutes to South Buffalo, unlock a door, and then go back to I was gone for like 3 hours of my family Christmas celebration. So that is a clause that was, I think we always had the lockout policy, but it definitely expanded when I had to leave my family's holiday celebration for a lockout.
I don't want to put you on the spot, Andrew, but I feel like, maybe you were just getting a little too much family time and you came up with this elaborate story and you're keeping the lie going years later. Tracks.
Too much detail gave it away.
Yeah.
Like I had to go 55 miles an hour for 3 hours. It's a lie.
It was slightly drizzly that day.
Oh, it was miserable. I've never I don't know. It is what it is. No, but it served us well though, because we've had situations. I had somebody call, actually Labor Day this past year, we had somebody that called and wanted us to rush right out and unlock their door. And I said, sure, as long as you have the cash in hand for us to unlock the door, that's fine. We'll be right out. And she's like, well, what am I supposed to do if I don't call a locksmith? Your options are call a locksmith or have us come out. And I guarantee you that my rate is still cheaper than an hourly for a locksmith on a holiday. So it behooves them to go through us. It's cheaper for them to go through us than to go through a locksmith still, but it's ultimately their decision if they want to call us, call a locksmith, or try to find an alternative way into the property. And obviously, if they cause damage doing that, well, now they're responsible for the damage. So,
okay, that's a great tip. Jen, what's a must-have that you include in your leases?
My favorite thing is financial consequences for non-compliance. So, we all want to put, keep those smoke alarms installed and in working order, or don't change the locks, or don't have a trampoline in the yard, or cut the lawn, or shovel the snow. Okay, those are fine, but then you have to put some teeth behind it, right? So when I drive by that property and see the trampoline, I'm going to write a lease violation. And am I going to just hope and pray that you feel like your hand has been slapped and you take the trampoline down? Or do we fight about it for months and months and months? And then I take it in front of a judge and go, Judge, they said they wouldn't have a trampoline. They have a trampoline. No, I put financial consequences behind it. And still they can't do the thing. But then I have the charge. And I tell you, the charge that a judge will hold up is going to get you action a lot faster. And I've been told by judges, they like my lease because it says what we expect, but then it also has financial consequences, because otherwise, if you just say to the judge, make them get rid of the trampoline, instead, if there's a $500 fine for having that, he's going to enforce the $500 fine. And he might even give me possession if they're refusing to abide by the lease and cure the default. So I always say, if you're going to put that you want something done in there, give a financial consequence to not complying.
Okay.
Do you also have something in your lease that stipulates that any sort of a fine or a fee, like a late fee or a fine for non-compliance or something like that, does that automatically count as additional rent? Do you have that written into your lease as well?
There is a type of language that I don't think it calls it rent, but essentially is chargeable and due as rent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't remember the language exactly, but yeah.
That's probably one of those better things to have in your lease. A lot of people miss out on that one. And I've actually had judges, our courts are so messed up in New York. I've had judges throw out late fees because it's not considered rent, it's a late fee. So now my lease specifically says that, any kind of a fee or a fine or whatever it is automatically becomes additional rent as of the first of the following month. So if I charge somebody a late fee on the 5th and they don't pay it until the end of the month, or they don't pay it at all as of the first of the next month, that becomes additional rent in addition to their current month's rent. So that's helped us quite a bit. That way we don't have to break it out on the eviction paperwork. This is late fee, this is rents. It kind of takes that guesswork off the table.
Yeah, I know that a guest that we've had on the podcast before, Elizabeth Colgrove, the reluctant landlord, said that for her lease, she always does $100. The first $100 of any repair is on the tenant. And I remember when she told me that, I was like, who signs that? She goes, I don't have any trouble getting it. And it stops them from, being real ticky tack on repairs. And I mean, it's kind of a little bit controversial. I don't know. I feel like, Jen, you kind of made a face when you heard that, but
yeah, no, I hate that.
I mean, it's a good way to not get your maintenance reported and let it get real out of control, I guess, or let them hire some jamoke off the street, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that's the stupidest lease clause, and I would never put it into my lease. I'll just outright with it. I think that is the worst idea because tenants are just not going to report issues.
Yeah, especially if it's like a leaky like pipe or something.
Yeah, like a drippy faucet. Nobody's going to report a drippy faucet until you get, you know, a $500 water bill, and you're like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
For the record, I politely disagree with whoever this is, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I don't know if Andrew did, but
no, I impolitely disagreed. But I got my point across, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, moving on, we'll give you each one more tip. So, Andrew, what's another must-have in your lease?
So this is one that actually came about as a real-life scenario. We had a tenant whose carbon monoxide alarms were going off. Eric, remember a couple years ago we had that winter storm that dropped 7 foot of snow?
Mm-hmm.
So when that storm hit, one of our properties had the higher efficiency furnace that comes out the sidewall of the building, and the snow got to the point where it had covered the vents off. So the furnace was, you know, shutting down essentially, and we had a CO alarm going off in the basement. And I was trying to explain to the tenant that you have to somehow get out there to get to that and clear it if you want to continue to have heat. That's what the issue is. It's the fact that the furnace can't breathe, so it's basically shutting itself down. And apparently there must have been a little bit of residual carbon monoxide that had fed its way back in. So we now have that clause in our lease that if the furnace is high efficiency or side venting, tenant's responsible for keeping objects, snow, and debris free from the air intake and vent areas. A buildup of snow, debris, or objects can lead to the furnace producing carbon monoxide, a colorless, odorless gas, which can be fatal. And that second line is actually in bold. And we make sure that if it's a high efficiency furnace, when we do our move-in inspection with the tenant, we specifically show them where the vents are and that they have to be kept clear of snow and stuff like that to prevent that from happening.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I like that, especially, I mean, it's one of those things that it's never an issue until all of a sudden you get 7 feet of snow dumped and half of your properties are covered, and you get everyone calling saying their stuff is broken. And it's a pretty simple fix, like you said. Mm-hmm. So I like that. You know what? We'll before we get too far from the trampoline question that was just coming up, we did get a live question that came in from V. So he said, back to the trampoline question. Let's say you fine the tenant $500. They get rid of the trampoline, but don't pay you the fine. What then? Are you going to evict them, the tenant, for non-payment?
The option is the landlord's at that point. The purpose of the fine is to get action immediately and to compensate you for the extra work of getting this compliance, because you post these notices and it creates all these phone calls, and it's just a lot of customer service that has to happen. And so, in my opinion, if I charge that guy $500, put the lease notice on the door, the violation, it's a notice to quit, actually, that says you have to do this or, cure the default or get out. If they take immediate action and aren't a pain in the butt about it, I'll get rid of the fine. I would. I mean, I'm not really that interested in the money. I'm interested in compliance. So, but yeah, I mean, if they were difficult about it and we really had to fight them and it took a month or two, absolutely, because that behavior means we're not going to get compliance moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's not a lease I want, actually. Yeah.
I'm curious, from a property management standpoint, how do you handle fines? So, like, let's say that your agreement with the landlord is that you take a percentage each month of the rent for managing the property. Do you have that same percentage apply to fines, or do you spell that out differently?
Well, our contracts are explicit. In most of these cases, these tenant penalties are ours to keep, because they, unless they actually are compensating for damage to the property or compensating for in some way a deficiency in their financial performance. But, if we're going to say, hey, you need to put the utilities in your name on or before your move-in date, and then they don't, and we say, okay, we're not only going to bill you back what you used on the owner's account, but we're also going to attach this fine. Of course, the owner gets the money for the utility. We get the money for the fine because we did the work to get the compliance.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. Jen, going back to the top tip. So what's we'll do this for our last tip, a must have in your leases.
I like it to say what happens when the lease is over. So does the lease automatically renew? Does it automatically terminate? Or does it go month to month? And what are the circumstances of that? What is required of either party to terminate the lease explicitly in writing? You know, you need to say, what does it take? Is this a text message? I think I'm going to move. That's not notice to me. Notice has a date. It's in writing. You know, I'll accept it via email. And we actually went to using a Jot form because it's getting the most compliance. And then I also like to see.
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, it's just like an online form. So I have a notice to vacate button on my website, and if you click it, it's just a form that you fill out on a website, and it just gets emailed to us. Okay. But it says on there, by typing your name below, you're indicating that you understand the following, and it gets a lot of information that we need. And then the other thing would be holdover. So holdover refers to a tenant who remains in the property beyond a lease period or beyond when they've indicated they're going to leave. So a tenant gives you 30 days notice. They're supposed to be out on, December 11th. Today's the 12th. We don't have the keys. They call you and go, oh yeah, the truck broke down and actually the new place isn't ready and this and that. Well, you might have re-rented that property, and then they become a holdover tenant. In our lease, we increase the rent to an exorbitant amount automatically when the holdover starts. And that's something we remind people when they give us notice. Hey, this date is very important. This date is not negotiable. This date is now the date you're going to leave. And if you remain in here beyond this time without our written permission, the rent's going to become this. And that has held up before in court. And you don't need it till you need it. And that day when they're not moving out and you've got contractors ready and a new lease starting, that's the day you want that holdover clause.
I bet you that half of the clauses that are in my lease are because we ran up against a scenario and realized we should have a written policy on this. Mm-hmm. Like, we have just so many little things in our lease that you don't really think about them. But every time I read the lease and look at that specific line, I remember the exact reason that it's there.
Yeah.
And that's why leases turn into 14, 15, 16 pages sometimes, is because you never know. You think you've got the perfect solution, and then somebody comes along and proves you're wrong.
So when you read through your leases, it's actually traumatic for you guys then.
It is, yeah.
Oh,
it's just a highlight reel of bad situations.
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay, that's great. I think there's some great insights that our listeners can take away from things to add to your leases right there. We have one last question that popped up from the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. This one came from Kathy. She says that when tenants apply and they have been living at a residence in one state for 3 years, yet they have a driver's license from a different state, is there reason to be concerned? So, Jen, I'm going to start with you on this one. The reason I like this question is because I think Kathy's being pretty thoughtful in either her tenant applicants and trying to, find if there's maybe some data that's not matching up. How would you handle a situation like this, or is it not a big deal to you?
No, it's absolutely a reason to be concerned, because I would be concerned that they're deceiving me on their actual place that they live. So it happens. We get apps, right? And they have a driver's license that has address A, a pay stub with address B, and maybe they even put a third address on the application. And that's because applicants think all kinds of things when you say current address. I've seen people put motel rooms. They're like, yeah, I live in a motel room right now because I just moved here and I got a job and I got to get a place. So I'm very, very careful about that. And I will check the pay stub, I will check the driver's license, and I will check the credit report. I want to know where you've been living. And if I have a question about it, I start to ask for proof. So if she's going to say, well, I've lived for 3 years in California, but I'm from Pennsylvania and I have a Pennsylvania driver's license, I've never changed that over. Okay, then give me your lease or your, some proof of ownership or whatever you have on this other place. Give me utility bills for that address in your name. Those kinds of things you can do, because that's what you're trying to assuage, right? So they're not hiding a place they've been living because it's been bad.
Okay, very great. Andrew, you got anything to add to that?
No, she hit the nail on the head. That's exactly the process that we use when we're looking at an application. We get the ID, we get a pay stub, we look at the application, and if things don't match, then we start asking those questions. And the one thing I guess I will add is when you look at a credit report, that'll generally have a series of addresses on it as well. So you can kind of look to see if there's other addresses that they don't even have listed that you need to make questions on as well. One of the common issues we have here in Western New York is someone will try to, and I'm assuming this is probably a problem everywhere. I'm sure it's not isolated to just Buffalo. We have a problem with tenants who will try to fake a landlord reference. So we'll actually go and look at the address that they have listed on their application. We'll check the tax record against that address to see who actually owns it. And one of the questions that we ask when we do our landlord references is, do you own the property or do you manage it? And more often than not, we wind up tripping people up on that question if they're offering the fake landlord reference. So we've caught some people, trying to be less than honest that way. And the other thing that we'll do is on the landlord references, if we think we might be walking into a fake landlord reference, when we do our research on the front end before we even make the landlord reference call, if we think that we might be looking at something that's not right, we'll ask, so-and-so said that their rent was $800 when really it was listed as $850 on the application. See if they correct you. That's a good way to try to catch somebody in the act of a fake landlord reference as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And asking those open-ended questions on those landlord questions or previous rental, I think that's a great way to catch people in the act. Unfortunately, some people fib a little bit, trying to get a place to live. So it's
happens all the time.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that concludes this episode number 67 of Landlord Live. I want to thank you too for your insights and your time, and for everybody that watched live, especially the people who ask questions. We love getting those questions and helping you out the best we can. So, until next week, guys, I will see you in a week.
Bye.
Have a good one.